He said, "Okay, you're going to hear the track. We'll give it a run through," he said to her. So, okay, so I pressed play and record, and I was there standing over the knobs, ready to control things. And she started singing, and what I had expected was that she would probably go from a whisper to a shout in, a moment. So how am I going to be ready for the kind of level and all of that? Anyway, without going into any boring details, I had various setups and things, and I was set on my settings within 10 seconds. So it was like in the first couple of lines of the song, and then after that, I'm leaving it sounding good. And so she wound up singing that song, and I think we probably used that first take, maybe went back and did the first line or two again. And, what a relief. But she is known for just being a great performer, straight out of the box, if you like. And so she was amazing. I think she stayed for lunch. I don't know if we did. I think she came in another day to do the other song. But she didn't stick around because she was moving between the studios doing all these tracks at the same time. And so in a couple of weeks, these tracks were recorded and mixed. The album was put together, released, and became one of the biggest selling albums of all time. So it was quite something.
Wow.
And what a lovely person to work with. And of course, we went on a couple of years after that to do the following album, again with a couple more songs, along with Rupert and Jamie West Oram on the guitar and everything. So that was more comfortable. We kind of knew a bit more what it was all about for the follow-up album. But a very special moment. But once again, I didn't really have time to sort of really get to know Tina or form any kind of close relationship, because really it was just she was in and out doing the vocals, and as usual I had my head down concentrating. So Rupert would be doing most of the communication as a producer, and I'd be just making sure everything worked. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a stupid question. And but back in the day, was it important for like you to, take a picture with the band, with her, with Phil, with Rodrigo, or buy a couple of vinyl and people sign for you? Was kind of popular for you, or for social media didn't exist back then? The internet, the no cell phones, so you need to old school cameras, or it wasn't like appropriate?
Yes. I go back and look at I've got so few photographs that I took in the studio. I have a collection of pictures I took during the Trident years of various sessions, a couple of dozen, and so they weren't often group shots or selfies or anything like that. It was more like you'd take an opportunity to grab a picture without, drawing too much attention. Of course, when it's on film, it wasn't like you go click, 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 because the film would be finished in 10 seconds. So you had to sort of choose your moment. So very few during the 70s. I had a few more during the 80s, during the farmyard period. And, over the years, you'd start collecting a few pictures, but you just didn't really think about it that much. And you should have done, because, there's so much interesting stuff in the archives. Of course, now there's such a volume of material available that it's harder to have those sort of exclusive special moments. But signed records and things. No, we just didn't really think much about that back then.
Yeah. Well, you should write a book. I don't know if you have written a book, or you're planning on writing a book, or maybe one day you will look at all these interviews and say, hey, remember that I told Claudio about private dancer or this or that.
Well, it does sort of jog your memory sometimes talking about these things.
Yeah.
The thing that's the thing about private dancer that's always been a bit on my mind is that of all the records I've ever worked on, they forgot to put my credit on the tracks that we did. Every other song had all the credits of the producers, the engineers, the musicians, the studios. All the personnel were listed for each track, but for some reason my name got left off. And I always thought, what are the chances on the biggest album, probably the biggest selling album that I've worked on, I never had a name credit on it, and everybody blamed each other for missing that. But it never got rectified. I mean, fortunately, on the following album it was done. But those are things you have to live with.
Yeah. Wow, man. No, I'm very serious about writing a book, Stephen. I mean,
people keep saying that to me. I should.
Let me get a list of. I got a list of a PDF of like 10 pages about stuff you work with. Man, UK, Brand X, Rupert Hine, The Fix, Howard Jones, Tina Turner, Morrigan, Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, and on and on and on, man. People in the UK are very humble and quiet, and they don't like to blow their own horns like they say here in the United States. But you should, because you were there. You did the work. It's not that the
80s
right?
were an interesting time during the Farmyard years, because that's when we got involved with Howard Jones, Tina Turner. The Fix was a big part of that, obviously only really for the American market. Saga was an interesting one to work with as well. The Canadian band Saga that we worked with in the early 80s. But then, there are all kinds of other interesting things that led from there. I worked with, I started working with some really interesting female artists around the time of the mid-80s, where I worked with an English singer called Judy Zook, who had a couple of big hits. I worked with Tapao, so Carol Decker. And then shortly after that, I went over on my first sort of real working trip to America, and outside of Farmyard was to work with Rupert Hine with Stevie Nicks. And so it was a very interesting time, because that started to be a transition between having always worked in a one place, like 70s Trident Studios. Very rarely did I work anywhere else. During the 80s, from 80 to 88, almost every project I did was at Farmyard Studios, which was co-owned by Rupert Hine and Trevor Morace, the drummer. And it was actually mostly Trevor Morace's business. But then Rupert had always wanted, I think, to look at possibly living in America or working in America. And so he went over to work with Stevie Nicks and invited me to go out there. And suddenly, I'm working outside the comfort zone. And it was a time when the kind of equipment that was being developed allowed people to set up studios in either sort of their homes, or they'd rent a house, and suddenly we were sort of putting in temporary studios, just bringing in a desk, a pair of speakers, some microphones, headphones, keyboards, and just sort of setting it up in a random space. And so that was a really big start working on the Stevie Nicks album, because she'd rented this, I was going to say, chateau. It was called a chateau, but it was like a mansion house up in Beverly Hills, and the dining room in that house got converted into a temporary studio with a grand piano, a fairly simple recording console, and a 24-track tape machine, a cassette machine, and a couple of bits of outboard equipment and a few microphones. And so it wasn't just me starting to work outside in different studios. It's working in different environments and people's homes or hotel rooms and whatever. So it was a big change, and it's not only a big change in production and everything, but to me, just going and working in America like that, and getting used to the whole sort of American lifestyle and the American music business, and working with somebody as sort of prominent at that time as Stevie Nicks. So that was a real eye-opener for me, and a very interesting time. Got to work with lots of different great musicians, and Stevie was such an interesting person, surrounded by a real sort of small clique of people that sort of not protected her from the outside world, but just kept things very under control. So it was a big sort of lifestyle change for me, going and living in a hotel, or a rented house, in fact, in Hollywood. So and so I'm taking all that into account, all that change, and at the same time working on a really interesting album with Rupert, Hine and Stevie Nicks. We did in the end come back to the UK to do the final mixing and the finishing of it. But that was what was quite nice about that production, in a sense, being in a private place rather than a rented studio. It allowed a lot of time for Rupert, who was helping. Stevie was writing the material, but sort of experimenting, and he was helping with the production and arrangement. And so they take their time trying things out. So in a sense, it was a new way of doing things, rather than in the past, it was bands coming in prepared and recording their material. So that was a very interesting change for me.
Yeah. Wow, man. Stevie Nicks. Wow. What unbelievable. You have worked with Howard Jones in many, many albums, right? The one in '84, the Humans Live, and then Dream into Action, the second one in '86. What memory you have for Howard? So he's a very nice person. I saw him. I went to a show a couple of days ago, and Howard Jones, Boy George with Culture Club. There were three bands, and he still sounds great, and he's a funny guy, nice person.
Howard's amazing, because I mean he had a very prominent sort of profile during the 80s, with the sort of whole electric sort of pop period, and he had sort of quite a number of hit singles. A lot of people sort of just think that's just him, but the fact is that he moved out of the limelight a bit after the first few albums, and he stopped working with the major label and developed his own label, his own studio, and he's carried on. He's one of the most prolific musicians I know. He's carried on, not just writing more sort of albums in that similar vein, but he also does piano solo albums. He does piano solo tours. He's a great pianist. People think of him as just being the electronic keyboard player, but he's actually a great piano player. So he does solo piano tours. He does solo acoustic tours with bass and guitar, with Robin Bolt and Nick Beggs, and he's always doing new material and new experimental stuff. But he's also he's very gracious in going back and re-performing all his big hits for people who really enjoy it. So he isn't just going out and doing the old stuff all the time like some acts do, but he does respect the people who just want that. But he's the loveliest guy. Again, it was an introduction that came to Rupert Hine and myself, and so we kind of became a team for those first two albums. And I'd been working with Rupert Hine for a couple of years, and we developed a lot of our own techniques in terms of how we like to record in an experimental way. And so we sort of drew Howard into, he was experimenting with being a solo electronic keyboard player. We brought in some of our sort of unusual recording techniques. And we spent a lot of time in the studio together experimenting. And so those first two albums have got some actually quite radical stuff on them, as well as them just being great sort of electronic 80s pop. There's some really interesting things. Now, after those two, Howard went off and worked with other producers and carried on doing some very important frontline stuff. But during his sort of the intervening years, I've worked with him on so many different occasions. On some of his albums, I've worked in his private studio doing some work. I also got involved with him on various levels, creating visuals. And that came about because in about 2006, 2007, Howard was wanting to put out like an EP, well, not an EP, it was actually a DVD of surround sound remixes of 4 songs. And he wanted to put these out a bit like an EP because it's only 4 songs on a DVD. And when he asked me to do one of the songs, it was a remix of something he'd recorded with something else. And when I was creating this, I said, really, Howard, when you create the DVD for this, I think it'd be quite nice to have something to look at the same time, not just a title screen, something experimental to look at. Because back then, it wasn't doing visuals with remixes and things like that. Well, hadn't become a particularly prominent thing. But I suggested that we do that, and I ended up doing the visuals for all the songs. Now, they were just using all kinds of things that were available at the time, just to create patterns or things that responded to the sound and all the rest. That led to Howard inviting me to create visuals for all his songs for when he went on the road in, I think it's 2009 or 2010, he went out to tour those 2 original first albums, all the songs. And I created visuals for projection. And so suddenly I was, because I often, the way I hear music, I kind of see it, or I see sound. So I created this for the whole show, and that sort of started a thing off between me and Howard, where I've done more visuals for his live shows, and but I've had other involvement with mixing for him, and it's just a long relationship that's gone on, and but they are reissuing. I've been doing some remixing of his early stuff, which might be coming out next year or something. So more on that and on.
Yeah, good. And well, that's interesting. As you were being the recorder, the mixer, but you were doing visual. Any artist that call you or say, "Man, I know the visual that you did for Howard Jones. Would you?"
No, I haven't really
do something for me, and
Yeah, I haven't really done that with anyone else.
Yeah.
I've done it for myself. I mean,
For yourself, yeah, I know.
thing,
Yeah.
because
We'll talk about that.
that's where it sort of encouraged me with my own material to sort of write both the music and the visual side of it simultaneously. I mean, that's probably a whole other
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
But but that's what kept me really interested in the whole music and sound world over the years, is always having new things to try out and experiment and stretch myself. Getting involved in live shows or live performance or visuals, it sort of kept me going, and getting into surround mixing and all of that. So that's why I'm still sort of kind of enthusiastic and enjoy what I do, because I'm always trying to find a new thing to get into.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty good, man. You're man, the people that how we doing on time, Stephen?
Well, okay, my end, but we're been going quite a long time already, haven't we?
We can do. It's up to you. I could continue, and then we can break it into the next time we speak. I mean, you have so much to talk. You should write a book, man. Keep on telling.
I should write a book. I mean, is there one more thing perhaps we could talk about today that you might want to ask about?
Yeah, definitely. And then we can do a session on, of course, Kate Bush. For Kate Bush, we'll probably talk 2 hours.
I probably can't. That's the only thing. There's so little I can say, but we'll come back to that.
In general terms. Yeah, in general terms. General terms. I don't want you to go in trouble or,
No.
Kate Bush's lawyers are going after me because you say something and I record it. No, I don't.
That's right. Yeah.
I have enough trouble in my life. I don't. In 1990. You travel around the world with the BBC production One World, One Voice. And of course, that was directed by Kevin Godley, who I interview as well. He's a very nice guy too. You filmed over 400 musicians on location. Feel free to elaborate what was all about.
Well, this was a real once in a lifetime thing to get involved with. And it's a bit of a shame in a sense that it's never been sort of really capitalized and reissued or anything. But I think part of the problem is that so many people involved and so many have to agree about everything. And so I won't go into that side of it. But that was extraordinary because Rupert and I were working on a production for a band. And we were in the middle of working on it in Rupert's house. Rupert had a house he was developing in London, and we were starting on recording some tracks. And Rupert suddenly gave me a phone call one day and said, "Listen, I've just been invited, or we've been invited to get involved in a rather big project." Now, the only thing is that we have to go to a meeting, but are you up for it? Because it means we'll have to drop the project we're doing, and we'll probably have to start traveling like in a week's time. I go, oh my goodness. So, all right. So we found ourselves in a meeting. He'd been asked, I don't know, I can't remember what the connection was that brought Rupert into it, but Kevin had wanted to make originally a 20-minute film for the BBC to end this 2-week period of TV shows that were being shown around the world on various different broadcasting stations called One World. And it was One World Week. It was a week of global broadcasting of drama, documentaries, all kinds of different things, interviews, chat shows, and all the rest. And they wanted to, originally, they approached Kevin Godley to possibly do something like a Live Aid concert. And Kevin had said, well, that's been done. Wouldn't it be much more interesting if we could, do this like a musical chain letter, is what he described it as, where, we travel around different places and we start with one musician and then we add another one and then they take over. And the original idea was to create a bit of music 20 minutes long and film it all. So everything you heard was filmed. Anyway, I remember going to a meeting with a room full of production people, and I had no idea. I mean, I had no idea what was happening here. I was being asked to, if you like, sort of come on board to do a lot of the recording or supervising the recording, or we had no idea. This was make it up as you go along. We had no idea really what was going to happen. Anyway, there was a week of panic after everybody agreed to get involved. We knew there was a broadcast date in about 3 or 4 months' time ahead, so we had to commit to making this thing ready for then. The idea was to invite all kinds of musicians to take part. So we spent a week trying to get visas, trying to get all our injections and things, because, to travel to some countries, you needed to have all the necessary jabs and
vaccines. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All of that. And so we had to get that. We had to get visas, short-term visas. So you had the production team sort of organizing this all, but it meant lots of traveling around. I had to research some portable recording equipment. No idea. I went to look at all kinds of systems. Like there was something called Sound Tools that was just being developed, which used a PC computer to record and edit digitally. That company became Pro Tools, which is now a really big thing, but it was just starting. But that was too complicated. There was another company that made a digital recording thing that maybe that would be a good idea. It was all too complex. So for some reason, I can't remember who I discussed it with. I went to talk to companies. I wound up being given a budget to buy a set of microphones, a set of recording devices, a small mixer, some loudspeakers, flight cases to put them all in, cables, headphones, just anything that would allow us to record in different situations. So, okay, a week later, we the production team, which was on the road, was 11 people. I mean, it wasn't that many. It was Rupert, Hine and myself. Kevin Godley is the director of the film side. Then you had a couple of production assistants. You had a couple of film sound guys, and and the camera operator, and also a video guy filming a documentary at the same time. We found ourselves in New York, where Rupert had prepared the opening bit of music with Sting and some electronic musicians from New York, and they created a groove and a simple opening song, and that was it. Went into the studio to record that, and some guest musicians came in and played overdubs. Some rappers came in and did some rap. And so after first day, we had like a load of content. And after a couple of days, that's when I remember Rupert saying with Kevin Godley, look, 20 minutes, that's not going to be enough time to do what we want to do. Let's aim for an hour. And let's get all kinds of things. And so that started the journey. We came back to England. We came to Real World. Now, it's the first time I ever came here in 1990, where Peter contributed some of his time, and there are some world musicians here at the same time. So Peter gave some background effects, and they did some improvised music on the spot and overdubbed. And then we went off to Howard Jones's place, where he did some piano, and a percussionist came in. We went off to David Gilmour's boat, where he has a studio, and recorded him. And now these were all fairly controlled in studio spaces, but then we started to go off and record in places like hotel rooms, or on the street, or on the beach, or and that's where, you know, I was having to start using this equipment to play bits of what we'd recorded before, so that people could add to it. Chain letter. It was adding to, layering, all these different things. I could go on about this for hours, but basically we did that for 10 weeks. We traveled around the world, and including going to Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, but Leningrad as it was in Russia, to record the Leningrad Symphony Orchestra, a 100-piece orchestra, again with a couple of microphones and a couple of tape machines. And then we came back and spent 4 weeks trying to make sense of all these recordings, while Kevin Godley was trying to make sense of all the film. And so we were bouncing backwards and forwards trying to make this program. And so it's an extraordinary, I mean, it could have ended up a real mess, a real shambles, because it was made up as we went along. But it wound up being the most beautiful, continuous, almost hour of music. And it was all basically about the state of the environment and the state of the planet that people used as their inspiration for writing the music and the songs and the lyrics and everything. And it's extraordinary. And I'd say it's one of the most challenging and exciting projects I've ever done. I just wish it had a bit more sort of public notoriety, but it really is truly a special moment. I mean, it almost killed all of us. It was such hard work. You know, we were on the road. We weren't sleeping on aeroplanes. We were working, you know, making notes, and I was making rough mixes on cassette to hand to the next artist the next day. It was extraordinary. But yeah, that was, and there were so many great artists involved in that. I'm sure you know, you just have to Google it to see the list of people on it. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. How many hours? We're talking. They were at the end, right?
The music?
The whole thing. Yeah. All the filming and all the music. Hundreds of hours, right? But
we had hundreds of hours. We had hundreds of hours recording, but we had lots of alternatives. So we had to make choices about what we would pick, because, you know, we'd have a Peter Gabriel reel of tape that had a layer of drone on it that would then have improvisation for 20 minutes. Well, then we'd have to go in and choose like some really great bits and then layer them with something else and find. So there were hours and hours and hours. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many hours of actual music there were. Yeah, I have a collection of 100 DAT tapes, the digital audio tapes, which have all kinds of stages of bits and pieces, reference mixes en route to getting there. But we had to sort of narrow it down to this 1 hour of compressing all the best moments. And that was the same with the film. They must have had so many reels of film. So when it was broadcast to 26 countries on the same date, live, back in the days when, you know, it's before streaming and before. So it was shown simultaneously in 26 countries to, it's like 250 million people. Some people say it was more than that, but it was a lot of people watching it at the same time. But it was also, there was a documentary made about the making of it, and they showed it by showing the documentary first, showing you the journey, and then showing you the result, which was a very clever way of doing it, rather than showing you the art and then explaining it. It was taking you on the journey that led to it. And so it's as a 2-hour special, it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, wow! I need to Google and do more research on it, because it's fascinating. I hope, you know, we keep on screwing the environment. You know, that was done in 1990, and now 30 years after that, still we are
Nothing's
the
changed.
same problem. Nothing's changed.
It,
So it
yeah.
would make a
It's
difference.
a real shame.
Yeah.
There was supposed to be a 30-year edition reissue of it, of One More One Voice, but it hit some problems in during lockdown, basically, manufacturing and getting agreements and everything. So that's kind of gone on hold, unfortunately. But we'll see.
Yeah, we need to convince Peter Gabriel and then ping Kevin Godley again to do part 2 and yourself. Rupert is not with us anymore, but
No,
it'd be good to do a sort of version 2, 30 years review and the same mess.
well, it would be the fact is that all the stuff I had to take on the road with me then, I could do most of it on my phone now. Do you know what I mean? It's like I had
Yeah.
I had 10 flight cases of equipment with me. If I had my phone and a microphone, I could probably, and a pair of earbuds, I could probably do it all even quicker.
Yeah, I know, it's cheaper too. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again for spending your afternoon with me again.
Yeah, let's leave it there for now. Yeah.
And then we'll do part 3 and part 4. Hopefully, hey, if we end up doing a lot of things, part 2, 3, 4, they can, take look at this, the transcript, and write a book itself.
There you go.
Oh, I remember
Yes.
the interview with Claudio. I can use them to write my own, my own book or something. But it's very nice talking to you again.
Okay, and to you. Okay, thanks very much.
No problem.
Bye for
Thank you,
now.
man. Take it easy.
Okay.
Bye.